Hello. Thank you. Give me a second. Let me just see if I can move that in. I can a little bit more. Okay. Hi. Is that on screen? It is. Ah, fuck it. Whatever. Taking a little time off because just had to recalibrate a bit of life stuff, and but I'm back now. Probably had to get some shit together, but we're good. So let's start with this one. It's quite funny actually. Like watching when Americans doing what Americans do best, which is assume, first of all, that they know what the fuck they're talking about when half the country can barely read about their own system, let alone someone else's. And just this weird perfect storm of people just completely misunderstanding Australia. So I'll just launch straight into it. So it's quite funny because you may or may not have seen this, because I think, X is sort of somewhat shrinking in relevance, but you may have seen it because, shots fired and all that sort of stuff. But you may have seen that I got to see. Okay, let's pause for a second. I have to be very careful with the words I use right now because I'm talking about sensitive topics such as terrorism, the T word, those sorts of things, because I'm talking about the regulatory environment around this type of content. So I have to be very careful, okay? Because, like I'm in Australia and there's a little bit of a dance going on around the law with like live streaming and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just a bit cautious of that. So, and also I haven't streamed in a while, so it just takes me a few minutes to warm up. Okay, so bear with me. But you may have seen this. I mean, it's fucking bullshit. Actually, let me rant for a minute, which is that I just came off another 12-hour fucking suspension off of Twitter. Okay, X. Mm-hmm. Because of something innocuous that I said, and it wasn't even literally, it was just one of those things where you could not even misinterpret it because I was joking with a friend and it gave me an instant 12-hour ban. It's like the same, they're not fixing anything. They're not fixing anything. Any of the actual problems that existed aren't being fixed. Okay, so just so you know, all he's really done is let the Nazis in. That's about it. Okay, he's providing cover for the right wing. He hasn't actually fixed at a product level any of the real problems that exist. Okay, it's the first time since the change of ownerships that I've had a suspension. But this one was particularly stupid. This one was even worse than the previous ownership. So just so you know that, I've just had it come off the back of a 12-hour ban. Again, I don't know why I bother, but sunk costs, habit, whatever. Okay. Anyway, secretly hoping that he just goes to jail, they liquidate it, and someone else buys it. We just hang in there. That's where I'm at the moment, where we just hope that it fucking just changes ownership somehow. Okay. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, there's no real intention of changing this or turning it around. It is now effectively even worse of a platform for propaganda than it was before. So just so you know, I initially came into sort of defending it a little bit because there were real problems with the platform, especially around algorithms. This is stuff that everyone in tech has known, which is that people put too much faith in content moderation, AI and algorithms in particular. There's too many false positives. There's no avenue for appeal. When there's a mistake, you're caught in this loop of no support, nothing. Now, I want you to know that if you pay for Twitter Premium or X Premium, you don't get support. So what it does is it actually locks you out of your account in all ways. So you actually can't message premium support while your account is suspended. You can't, you don't get access to any support to say, hey, you made a mistake. Even if you are Premium Plus, ID verified, as I am. The only reason I pay for premium is because I want ID verification, right? And, otherwise it would be basic for editing. But I pay for premium because of, but you don't get any support. So basically, I mean, the regulatory framework is shifting and it's more in their focus. I don't want to be saying stuff online that I'm not going to follow through on, but I'm looking at making some misleading and deceptive conduct complaints and seeing some various angles to try and at least contribute and move some of the law forward in this regard. So all of that. That was a little warm-up rant. Okay, so I'm back. So you may have seen last week this whole shots fired thing on X, where the eSafety Commissioner, which is an independent government-appointed department, effectively like an ombudsman, their job is to oversee and enforce, the Online Safety Act. Okay, now. The changes to so there's lots okay, so I'm going to sort of dial it back because apparently I'm in the business of year 9 civics these days rather than the actual details, because I don't get time to focus on the details because I'm too busy educating fuckwits on basic shit. But bear with me. Okay, now, so how does Australia's law work? It doesn't work like the United States. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing is, you need to understand how the Australian legal system operates. Okay. You need to understand the history around internet policy in this country, specifically, which people don't know. It's not authoritarian! For fuck's sake, it is literally the most democratic process for a complex society that you could probably have, other than rotating chairs once a week. With an online vote for who's going to fuck. It's like, what the fuck? It's just learn the basics before you mouth off. I'm going to get... Second, people are throwing a lot of words around, okay? Like misinformation, terrorism, what is hate speech? What is this? What is obscene? And they just ignore the fact that case law exists. These things are defined, okay? It's not... This is the thing that pisses me off most about fucking online discussions about politics, which is these idiots who have no fucking understanding how the system works for a start. Ask them how laws pass, and they couldn't tell you. So anyway, I don't know why I fucking care, but I do. And it's not a unique problem. Political literacy, civic literacy is like a prevailing, overarching problem always. Okay, basic literacy is a problem nowadays. But so people are arguing, and they go on the internet and they pontificate, and they do this thing where they act as though these words are a philosophical term that no one's defined yet. But what does hate speech mean? What is terrorism? What do you mean by misinformation? What is an ordinary... It's like these things have actual legal decisions. They are being defined. They are detailed in the Act. Read a thing once. Just once. Look up the definitions of things and look up the process. And I think you'll find that you're an idiot. Okay. So, anyway, so the eSafety Commissioner issued a warning, okay, so there was a terrorist attack. I'll put that in quotes because that's obviously, that again has legal distinctions to it, okay. A terrorist attack that was filmed and put on various social media networks. Now, because we've now got the Online Safety Act, okay, the eSafety Commissioner is able to issue a letter of concern, effectively, a takedown notice. Now, most of that is voluntary. Most of it is, the industry helped draft the code to create something fairly reasonable, good faith, all of that sort of stuff. Okay, so this was an industry-determined code. It had a very broad consultation process for like about 2 years. Okay. It has its gaps, and there are concerns around sort of how overarching it is. But again, that comes back to how the Australian legal system operates differently to the fucking idiots in the United States. Okay. Which is that you don't just sue the government here. Okay. It just doesn't work that way. The role of an ombudsman, okay, or any kind of delegated authority, in this case, it's the eSafety Commissioner, okay. Ofcom might be, or ACMA and Ofcom are kind of, if you're in the UK, ACMA and Ofcom are probably comparable, right, in terms of the authority, okay. They operate to hold the government to account. They operate as an integral part through regulations and complaints and process and alternative dispute resolution and various other things. Our goal is to avoid the kinds of like pitfalls. Again, America, we've designed some stuff to avoid the things that America struggles with. Okay, which is, accountability and process and all those sorts of things. So anyway, now, best system on earth. Of course it is. America is the best system. You can't question that. That's how it is. It is just a fact. America is the best. If you say it often enough, it ends up being true. It is just the best system. Full stop. I don't need to read anything or learn anything. I just need to repeat the shit that I heard on Fox News. That's all my learning. I don't need to do any reading or learn how the political system operates. Even if I'm in Australia, I'm just going to talk as if like we live in America, which we do not. Okay, which is that we have a system of ombudsmen, okay, and regulatory bodies, okay. Now, Americans might be a bit confused because they've got regulatory bodies that are effectively don't do much, okay. Ours actually do stuff, okay. So what you can do is issue a complaint to the eSafety Commissioner, and their job is to avoid the courts, if anything. Now, so, I'm stammering like a motherfucker. It's been a while, I'm a bit rusty. Now, so the eSafety Commissioner said, please take down this horrible content. Now, I'm just as a side point going to point out that if you're going to die on a hill, I would say that you shouldn't be dying on a hill of Nazis, live stream terrorist attacks. Like, I'm sympathetic to the view. Like I have said that, it filters down from there. Okay. And now obviously I've been talking about kiwi farms and what happened with kiwi farms and some of the sort of structural problems with that. But that's because I actually take the time to learn how shit operates and actually know what I'm talking about. Excuse me. taking a while to fucking warm up. Hang on, let me just get my dig bottle. All right. So there's a lot of, now what we've got here, there's a lot. The reason I'm just like having to warm up is because I also need to warm up my brain here, because this is actually quite legally dense stuff. All right. And everyone's sort of got this idea that, again, this is just idiots. I don't know. Okay. I don't know why I'm engaging with idiots, but, you know, people might learn some stuff. And I'm also just riffing. So whatever. I don't have a script or anything. So I've got notes, but no script. But so this whole X versus Elon Musk thing is the whole premise of the Online Safety Act is it emphasizes reasonable. Okay. It emphasizes good faith, that you've got to take reasonable steps, that you've got to minimize the risk. Nobody, and this is the problem with people who, again, what does it mean by fucking terrorism? This is this internet quibble bullshit. Quibble bros. Stop it. It's defined. Look it up. There's a legal definition for it. For fuck's sake, before you react, before you go explaining shit, maybe look up what the reasonable person test is. It's established in law across all common law countries. You fucking idiots. Reasonable, ordinary person. That is a thing, okay? That is defined in law. It continues to be defined and redefined on a case-by-case basis. That's what the courts do. That's why they're called cases. It's a case where it needs interpretation. And then that interpretation is applied. Okay, now, so what is hate speech? I don't know. Look it up. Look up the case law. It depends. Yes, okay. Thank you, tech bro. You got to take reasonable steps. The word reasonable has a legal meaning, which is, and it again, you're going to have, it will be tested in court, okay? So, fuck me. It's so annoying because people act like these things are just opinions. So why do you bother doing anything if some dickhead on Twitter can just do a 500k impression tweet, having no ability to even point Australia out on a map, let alone understand our legal system? Like, fuck. And then he gets all the hot takes and I get banned for no reason. So fucking hell. Jesus Christ. Anyway, so the history of internet censorship in Australia. Where should I start? So basically, under the online, so X is, he's been a fuckwit. Now, he's got a point. There is a sliver of a point in the jurisdictional part, and I'll get to that. Okay, so I'm just warming up, talking about fucking whatever. Okay. So this is happening across the world. I talked about the Online Safety Bill in the UK. It's roughly similar, okay, the Digital Services Act. A lot of this stuff is due to the fact that a lot of these things were it has to be evolving. Now, it was when I first studied, like when I first did legal studies, like back in undergrad, right? It was called cyber law, and I did a cyber law unit, okay? And we were talking about these issues way back then, okay? Now, the gaps in law that existed like back then, this was what, 2001-ish? 2001. And I did a cyber law unit. This is how long this shit's been going on. And I actually remember some of the legal issues that were presented were actually as a result of one of the lecturers at the university that I was studying at, where a student felt quite aggrieved by one of my lecturers and basically proceeded to harass, stalk, just defame with impunity online, and just made this guy's life a living fucking hell. And his story really stuck with me, first of all, because it was close, obviously because he was in the School of Journalism at my university, but also that because he was a very early example of the cracks that existed in the current legal framework, which was access to defamation law, which didn't apply online, access, harassment and all those sorts of things didn't apply online. You needed to have, there's all these legal gaps. Okay. And so over the years, they've been trying to fill those gaps. And we've had this problem of like politicians being boomers and like not understanding the internet, not necessarily understanding the technological limitations. A lot of it has been trying to explain that certain things can and can't be done, and that innovate harder or, nerd harder is not really an acceptable thing. Some things are just technically not possible, or present privacy risks, or in conflict with other laws, like for example around encryption and those sorts of things like that. It's obviously blah blah blah. Anyway, so there's this long history of like most countries, the law around the internet being, first of all, sitting in the gaps. Okay, so there's gaps, okay, across different things, and that is also unique to Australia, because we have, with our system, we have very siloed, okay, departments, okay, very clear distinctions between departments, okay, and there's a reason for that, which is separation of powers, okay. There's checks and balances that we talk about. So they'll establish an authority. So like, let's use ACMA, which is the Australian Communications and Media Authority. Okay, they regulate broadcast. Okay, but then you've got the Information Commissioner, which regulates privacy law, and then you've got the National Broadcast, the ABC. Then you've got the Communications Department. Those things are quite siloed. Okay, now one of the things I've talked about before around election like advertising, part of the reason why you can't necessarily why it's been difficult to police even like the most overt like disinformation, malinformation, not misinformation, whatever, but actual things that every objective person would go, that's really not fair. It's not fair to democracy, right? That kind of disinformation. Those things fall in gaps between, like, the government, that the agency has certain powers in that narrow area. So ACMA can regulate advertising. Okay, the Australian Electoral Commission administers elections. Okay, then you've got what's the other one? The Privacy Commissioner, does information. And what these misinformation campaigns online do is that they sit in the gaps between those silos. But those silos exist for a reason, which is so that they can, so that it's not, so that they're not authoritarian. This is the thing I'm trying to get across, which is this, you've got to really understand Australia and our unique hybrid system between, borrows bits from everywhere to be able to understand how it actually operates. And by design, we are not authoritarian. It is one of the most inclusive, again, not without its flaws, not without its gaps, not without its problems. Like anything, political advertising, especially political online advertising, is a gap, right? Because the Electoral Commission administers elections, and because they administer elections, they can't necessarily rule on what's true or not, because a mandate of that particular department is that they're not allowed to mediate the truth, because they're supposed to be independent. They're running an election. Do you see how it goes? ACMA. So I'm going to explain so ACMA is the broadcasting. So in the UK, it's like Ofcom. I always get my, I think is it FCC in America? Whatever it is in America, who gives a shit? No one cares. There's too many F departments, but anyway, I think it's FCC. They, regulate broadcasting, but ours is more narrow than that. Okay, so it's not just the department. It is actually, each department also has an ombudsman that takes public complaints, and that the ombudsman is then empowered to investigate the department and do an inquiry and look into things on behalf of citizens, consumers, concerned groups, whatever. Okay. Outside of that, you have the electoral system. You've got the political system. Okay. You've got the legislature. Okay. That does the legislation part. Okay. The minister oversees the departments, but the departments are subjected to an ombudsman. And that's what the eSafety Commissioner is. The eSafety Commissioner is supposed to fill the gaps. Okay. So anyway, I haven't explained that very well because I'm still warming up. But you got to understand that this is not just one thing. And also it's not just, people are bundling in too many things, because when you're talking about misinformation versus a video of a terrorist attack, you're talking about different laws, different mechanisms, different processes, and different authorities and stuff like that. So anyway, so what we're talking about with this X thing is quite a specific process. Okay. So people are going, what about misinformation? Well, if it's misinformation, there's no problem because they've got, do you know what they do on the eSafety Commission website with misinformation? Guess what they advocate for? Public education. Next. Critical reading skills. Next. Move on. They're not criminalising misinformation. They're acknowledging the problem. And they have powers to, deal with the most egregious breaches like malicious stuff. Again, this is a criminal thing where you've got to prove intent and all those sorts of things, okay? It's a high bar and a high threshold. Again, look up what stuff means maybe, and I'll get to that. I must apologise. I'm a bit rusty because I've been having a break and stuff. So, and I'm not as prepared as I'd have liked to be. But anyway, whatever. So you got this. So with X, this whole X versus Albo thing. Now, initially when I saw the rhetoric, I was sitting there and they're like, okay, shots fired against X. And the rhetoric they were using was saying, we're sick of arrogant billionaires and, all that sort of stuff. So let's park the rhetoric for a minute, okay? Politician's going to politician, okay? Now, the eSafety Commissioner is not part of that necessarily. Now, she is appointed. Okay, hang on, I'm muddling up my thoughts. There's too many things going on here. There's too many things I want to talk about, and I just haven't really, where's my fucking notes? I'm trying to think about the order in which I do stuff, because I'm just trying to think about whether I explain the basics of how the political system works first, or whether I just go into the details. That's what I'm trying to decide. Just give me a second. I probably should have decided beforehand. Who gives a shit? So anyway, okay. What I will do, I'll just explain a little bit about how laws are made first, I think. Probably the best way to go. How laws are made in Australia at the federal level. Now, remember, we also have state governments, okay? We are a federation, and a lot of the power defaults to the states. Now, that is changing over time, but some things are, that's always up, and there's always that constant negotiation and moving and shifting between federal and state governments. But let's simplify it, okay? Now, what I will say is that there is a Commonwealth Criminal Code, which is the federal criminal law, okay? But most criminal law, in terms of, like your day-to-day misdemeanors and sort of stuff like that, that's a state thing, okay? You've got your state criminal codes for things like harassment. You've got, various other things. But I'm just going to park that because that's a whole other fucking thing, and I've already taken too long to get to the point. Okay. So federal law, you've got the Federal Criminal Code, okay? You've got where are we? See, even I have to look this shit up because there's just too many. The way we work is that lots of different acts work together in conjunction, and bad actors exploit gaps. That's fuckwits exploit the gaps. And that's the problem, is that we just have this whole series of conventions that are basically the whole premise of Australian law is don't be a fuckwit. And if you're a fuckwit, we'll come after you. Stop being a fuckwit. That's really all you need to know about Australia, is that it's, we've got these norms and conventions and, social contract and an understanding that people aren't going to be a fuckwit. So then if you're a fuckwit, we need power to stop you being a fuckwit. Okay? There we go. Australian Law 101. You've got the Broadcasting Services Act. Okay? So that is the primary act for ACMA, which is the Communications Media Authority. What that does is that determines your standard sort of media rating system, okay? That's the thing that sort of like the benchmark. Now, again, not perfect, okay? Leans conservative, okay? That is another area that is subjected to a new process every few years and subject to review and has a panel and all that sort of stuff, okay? There's this constant moving thing where you're always consulting, always taking submissions. You can always write to the minister. The minister can always initiate amendments to the bill if they've got the political will to do it. Okay, so you've got the Broadcast Services Act. That is administered mostly by ACMA, and that is the stuff where it's like your G, C, PG, M, R rating and not rating. Okay, now this is relevant because that rating system, okay, it's the Online Safety Act is built sort of on that, okay? Now, what the Online Safety Act does is this is what and again, it's similar in some in some places and different in others. But what's unique is that we sort of have everything is sort of interacting with the other things. Okay, so you can't just take one bill in isolation. Usually our acts plug in the gaps of others, okay, and interact with others. And then they pass, if there's like a conflict between that and another act, then they make sure that they clarify what definition they mean in the act and all those sorts of things. It's extremely fucking boring and extremely complicated, but you need to understand that there is no one act, even though it is the Online Safety Act and there are problems. It interacts with other things and relies on established definitions and established norms and all of those sorts of things. Okay, so the Broadcast Services Act and that's administered by ACMA. Okay, that is the broadcasting thing with the rating system. Okay, now ACMA has the power to take down, request takedowns of certain things as well, especially with broadcast with media. They deal with commercial media. Okay. Mostly. Then you've got the Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman, and then you've got the Information Ombudsman. The telecommunications industry deals with ISPs. Then you've got the Information Commissioner, which deals with information, privacy, all that sort of stuff. You've got the ACCC, which deals with Competition and Consumer Commission, right? That's like the FTC in America. Okay, so these all work together, but it's very important to note that the reason that they don't work together is by design, because they are there to for independent. They're meant to be independent. Okay, so because you don't want them all. There's a weird democratic. There's like a decentralization that occurs through the silos. Okay, but that can also mean that it is inefficient and takes a long time. So there's again costs and benefits to everything. I don't know. Anyway, so even just trying to fucking explain it. But then you've obviously got the criminal code, okay? The Commonwealth Criminal Code. That deals with federal crime, okay? That is where, all those sorts of stuff, okay? Now, and then you've got the Online Safety Act. You've got a bunch of other stuff, okay? So what the Online Safety Act is it's really kind of an industry code. Industry is mostly voluntary, mostly good faith, mostly reasonable. Now, when idiots talk online, they act like the word reasonable actually doesn't have it. What does reasonable mean? Who is reasonable? I don't know. Look it up. Court said so. Have a case. Be a test case. They'll define it for you. Ask someone. They might define it for you. Reasonable person is a concept in law where it is a hypothetical reasonable person who has access to all of the information. They're not the average person, the reasonable person. So somebody who has access to all information, okay? Think about maybe the veil of ignorance. So you don't have, you're sort of an hypothetical unbiased person. So it's big in defamation law and employment law and those and sort of things that involve risk assessment a lot, which is that thing where trying to determine if you've got a duty of care towards another person. So what they've tried by using the word reasonable person, okay, or reasonable, that puts a legal I'm trying to explain it in a way that is not boring, and I'm failing miserably. But this is a live stream. The purpose of a reasonable person, right, test in law, in the legal test, right, is it's basically trying to determine whether or not you would be responsible in the eyes of someone who had access to all the information. So I'm trying to use an example. So online, traditionally, there would be no real duty of care to other users. So hang on, let me just think of the best example. The best example is probably in motor vehicles. Okay, so with a driver's license, okay, a reasonable person would be expected to obey the road rules. Okay, that's probably the best analogy I can think of. A reasonable person would be expected to obey the road rules, not crash into people, not harass people on the road, okay? The reasonable person threshold is sort of expected to behave in this certain baseline way, okay? Now, obviously, if something like a spider jumps out and you crash your car, then that's not a reasonable person wouldn't have predicted that would have happened, okay? Again, I'm butchering this because I'm trying to move the fuck on. But anyway, and I'm thinking of this on the fly. But it's basically a hypothetical. That person, the reasonable person, doesn't exist. And like, there's so much case law dedicated to determining what is and isn't like reasonable. Okay, so it comes down to whether, and a lot of that stuff can determine whether you are responsible or not, negligent or not, or anything like that. So anyway, I just wanted to. My main point was that it's fucking defined. So anyway, it's not a matter of Twitter opinion that what a reasonable person is. That's like, it's just something that you'd need legal advice on. Okay, I'm not a lawyer. Sorry. But it's so the whole premise of the Online Safety Act, right, is that platforms, ISPs, users, all of those things can have a reasonable expectation of. So for users, a reasonable expectation of safety. Now, again, safety is, like, again, the Act defines it. It's not something that you can relitigate. Okay. Second, it's but also the online platform. So there's a reasonable expectation that they will put in take reasonable measures voluntarily to remove things that a reasonable person would consider egregious or horrific. Okay, so the word reasonable appears an awful lot. And that's the point, okay, is that it has a legal definition. It's not just some fucking fever dream from that you're going to get like the police knocking on your door, like, despite what right-wing propaganda says. It's not going to happen. Okay? Unless I want to make an example of you, which sometimes, obviously there's interest in pushing things forward to be a test case so that these things can be clarified. And that's why I've been sort of thinking about how I'm waiting for my right time to initiate action on the stuff around my account, right? That's how you move things forward. You be part of it, you participate in it, or you sit and whinge on Twitter about shit you don't know anything about. Okay, so anyway, with the whole X thing, this is where you can't really be conflating too many things at once because they're dealing with quite a specific issue, okay? Elon Musk is a fuckwit, okay? The thing is that I find myself having to defend this, but he's got a point. So in the Online Safety Act, it differentiates between Class 1A, Class 1B content, okay? This is quite specific, and let me get my notes out because the words are it's so boring. Okay, I'm boring myself. I can't imagine anyone watching this finding this fucking interesting. But anyway, where are we? So the basic premise of the whole Online Safety Act is that, like, ISPs, social media networks, anyone who's runs a community, that sort of stuff, that you've got to take reasonable steps to ensure people can use the internet safely. Like, that is the overarching principle. Okay. That obviously has grades upwards. So the big platforms obviously have a higher, level of responsibility versus sort of your low-level community manager or, someone who runs an online community has to take reasonable steps to make sure that people are not harassed or, driven to suicide or anything like that. We have a responsibility. So what it does is, using the word reasonable person, it also establishes a duty of care, okay, between me and my community, or Facebook and their users. So again, there's questions there. That will be case by case basis. Okay. Now, this is where how the Australian system works differently to the US system is that in the US, people would initiate a lawsuit, okay, usually, to get that moving forward. Whereas here, you have to go through a certain process of complaints. and the ombudsman before it gets to the courts. Again, by design, to make it more accessible. It doesn't cost me anything to submit a complaint to the ACCC, for example, over, premium being offered and saying that they're offering support and then not offering you the product that they promised. Okay. That angle costs me nothing. Okay. The only thing it costs me is my time and $100,000 in student debt. But but that process, it's more like a sort of alternative dispute resolution. They will initiate an investigation, and then if they get enough complaints, they will they'll do more. They'll regulate, right, and they'll come after them. And so they want to. So that's one part of it. Okay, so one part of it is just a broad commitment to a safer internet. Okay, now you can quibble over what that means. You whatever. Okay, who gives a shit? Okay, I don't care. It's not relevant, really. It's just quibbles. But then you've got minimum, because I think that there is an understanding that if you are in a public space, that you behave in a certain way. I would argue that if you want to share certain things and you want to have free speech on, and all of those sorts of things, that is incompatible with a megaphone in a public space. Okay. I would say that you can get your own private community and your own private space, and you can do that. And that's why I've actually defended Kiwi Farms for the most part, because they don't count as a large, online, as a very large online platform. Those things are very different. Okay, so your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, those things, those have massive amounts of scale. They would be considered out in public. Okay, what you say in a community, you should, the community can self-govern. Okay. Now, it gets more complicated when you start looking at things like DMs and communities and Facebook groups and those sorts of things. But for the most part, like that, those two distinctions have to be there as well. Okay. And so the main goal of this is to also minimize accessibility to the most egregious forms of content. Now, the actual legal word, and I keep forgetting this, I should know it, but I don't because I'm old. And I can't remember shit anymore, okay, is abhorrent, violent content. Now, that is defined in the Act, okay? It is defined in the Criminal Code, 2019. So in the wake of the Christchurch attacks, okay, there was a gap. They identified a gap in the law where the online platforms did not act quickly enough to take down that content. Okay. Now, whether you feel that should be live streamed or not is irrelevant. I don't think that it should be. I think, again, reasonable person, I think that actually fits under you're being an unreasonable person, right? You don't fit that. You're not rational or reasonable. Most reasonable people would say, you know what? I don't think we should have live terrorist attacks live streamed. Okay. I think that's pretty fair. Okay. It's not about you and your opinion on what's reasonable. It's about an actual, like, what most people with access to all of the data would believe. You're not reasonable. But the whole goal of sort of class 1 material is to reduce the spread, okay, so and limit the reach, and to take reasonable steps for content that is not just refused classification. Okay, now, porn fits into a weird category there because that's where there's sort of, again, I'm inclined to agree with critics on this, which is that, this is where there's sort of degrees, okay? But in the case that we're talking about here with X versus the eSafety Commissioner, okay, the process is quite specific because what we're talking about here is an online crisis event, okay, which is abhorrent violent content, which is describes quite a specific thing, which is a terrorist act, okay, which it doesn't matter what the victim said, okay, it doesn't matter. What it is that, with the from the commissioner, okay, the commissioner determines that this is considered an online crisis event, which is basically similar to declaring a state of emergency. It is an exception. It is not a daily thing. It is a case-by-case thing. It has a high threshold, okay. And because there had been, some, things are a little precarious at the moment, especially politically and geopolitically, you kind of err on the side of caution, okay, with that. So I can understand how they would declare it an online crisis event, and that triggers Okay, so the eSafety Commissioner declares it to be an online crisis event. Okay, that is absolutely distinct from other Class 1 material, which is things like, things that are refused classification or child porn, anything that's sort of, CSAM or anything like that. They are distinct things. They have separate meanings. They have separate processes and separate criteria. The online crisis event, I just want to make it very clear. It is very specific. It has a high threshold and it is still voluntary. Okay? So what happens? They declare an online crisis event. Okay, as per the Criminal Code 2019. Again, I have to fucking keep reading this. I'm sorry. But it's got a graduated approach. So depending on the severity, okay, and the emergent, and how how immediate that threat is, they will do various things. Most of it has been that they will just proactively take it down, like Facebook, YouTube, Google. They will just voluntarily they don't want that on there. They go, okay, Facebook, they have some lawyers, and they go, you know what, I think proactively we should take it down. They don't need a letter, okay? They don't need to be asked because they're reasonable people. They're not Elon Musk, okay? But they do graduate that down, okay? So depending on, something like, a live suicide where there's likely to be copycat events. Now, again, there's a separate act around suicides, okay? That's a whole separate set of triggers and mechanisms and processes and all those sorts of things. But that you could declare an online crisis event. If there's a high risk of copycat events and those sorts of things, they will issue a takedown notice, and usually, hopefully within 24 hours, that stuff goes away. Now, that's not permanent. It is only in the period of time where people might, there's a window where people, things might need to cool off. Okay. So it's more about the risk of copycats, the risk of things getting, that sort of social contagion going on. Okay. Especially given the political situation right now, it is absolutely not surprising that anyone would declare any kind of religiously motivated crime or anything like that. They'd be a little bit more sensitive to that. In the wake of sort of 9/11, they had the same thing. There was that sort of red alert. We're on red alert really effectively at the moment. Okay. So people are a bit touchy. They're more inclined to declare these online crisis events. In terms of using that judgment, I would always err on the side of caution. If I was it's not authoritarian. It's actually quite the opposite. And I'll talk about why it's not authoritarian in a minute. It's literally, just stop using that fucking word if you don't know what it means. But it's got a high threshold. And lots of criteria, okay? So it's a case-by-case basis. It's usually for less than 3 months. So the takedown is usually less than 3 months. After that, they're not really worried. It's just more that window where it's likely to be contagious, okay? Again, this is common sense stuff, okay? So what they'll do is they'll issue a blocking notice, okay? So it's different to a request or a letter of concern. Usually with something like misinformation or disinformation or something else that's less urgent, if it's not an online crisis, they'll just issue one of the letters that you'll see, okay, which is we're concerned about the amount of disinformation on your platform. Please do better, okay. And that's, that's whatever. They just put that in the special filing cabinet or do what they want to do internally, okay, to fix it. FYI, whatever. But the blocking notice is different. So the amendment to the criminal code is significant because that actually, it's mostly, the blocking notice compliance is mostly voluntary. But at some point when, what Elon Musk finds himself in, or X, the predicament that they find themselves in is that there's a voluntary code. Okay, there's a voluntary, the blocking notice, they go, okay, we think you should block this. Here's the URLs. That's all of that sort of Twitter file stuff that you've seen, just sort of formalized, and there's a more transparent process around that, the blocking notice. You can actually see all of this stuff, okay? Here it's quite public. It disappears into the void once it goes to the tech companies, and that's the problem. But basically, so if you comply with the blocking notice and take it down, what that does is it actually protects you from liability should something happen, okay? Again, lots of details under that. But what it does is so let's say that you post something where there's some sort of violent attack, like a shooter or whatever, okay? If the platform takes it down, they're not being forced, but what they're doing is putting incentives in place, which is basically if you adhere to that voluntary blocking notice, we're asking you, what we will do is we will also if you comply with that, we'll provide you with legal protection and legal cover, okay? If something should happen as a result of you not taking it down, you're on your, if you don't take it down, you're on your own legally, okay? Or your non-compliance may actually be used to establish, intent if you get sued, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, it may be used as evidence. I think that's, again, fairly reasonable, right? So if you ignore it and you get prosecuted, then obviously the fact that you ignored it becomes quite compelling evidence that you are, complicit, and you might be opening yourself up to liability. Again, this is like, again, there's all these legal, I'm not going to explain all of law to you, but that's the basic role of it. But then they've also got this idea where it is actually enforceable as well. So they do actually have new laws, okay, fairly new laws, where the platforms, if they don't comply, they can be escalated to enforcement, and it can have like big fines. So I think it's like 10% of their revenue, $10 million or something like that, and even jail time. Okay, so it's not nothing to sneeze at. But if you are, but again, the threshold of that is really high. They're making an example of Elon Musk here, which they're just looking for an opportunity to test their luck. But that's why the sort of saber rattling's happening in the media and all that sort of stuff. But really, they're well within their rights to do that. Okay. So he really has just ignored blocking notices. Okay. So it's really is just Captain Fuckstick has, decided not to comply. Now, that's not entirely the case, because let me qualify my words here. So Twitter, X, whatever the fuck, they did comply voluntarily, and they took it down. But what they did was they took it down for Australian users only. Okay. And that's where it gets really interesting, because this is the part where I kind of go, all right, obviously I don't agree or disagree. I see that there's a point there, and I think it needs clarifying in the court. And I don't know what court would fucking do this. There's a gap there. Again, psychos work in the gaps. Okay, they exploit gaps. That's what psychopaths do. Okay, and capitalism, and psychopaths together, you end up here, which is where you end up dying in a ditch over fucking That said, I think it's worth clarifying. So what they did was they issued the blocking notice, and X actually complied with that, as far as I know. Now, I don't know that have the details here. Okay, this is like the details of the case. I'm speaking out of my ass. This is just the basic storytelling. But so they did comply with that, but they blocked it for Australian users. Okay, now the eSafety Commissioner. Now the Act actually says that it doesn't matter whether it's hosted here or hosted overseas. If Australians can they can actually ask that it get taken down, regardless of where it's hosted, and if Australians can access it. Now, the thing that the eSafety Commissioner is sort of hanging their hat on, okay, the heavy lifting here, is the fact that Australians can still access it using like a VPN, okay, or on, by changing their location or whatever, okay. This is where I think that it's a little tenuous, but it does need clarifying, okay? Because, again, it will probably come back to golden rule or whatever, which is that the intent of the law is paramount here. And I think this may actually go to the High Court. It might be settled, or it's actually a really interesting question, because the intent of the law is to, it's to clarify the intent of the law. So, it isn't over. So the argument I'm just thinking too many thoughts at once. So the overarching intent of the law is to, again, with that online crisis event, to mitigate any potential copycats, right? Or that sort of stuff. Okay. Now, anyway. Oh, sorry, I've gone off on a tangent because I was thinking too many. I'm just deciding whether I'm not going to go into that fucking detail. No, I can't be bothered. It's boring for everyone. But it's meant to be, it is actually a really fascinating question, and I can't think how you could enforce this. So, I mean, they've got a point. X has a point, which is basically, Australians can't access it. We've done our bit. We've complied, but you can't censor US content. But the Australian government's argument is that, well, Australians can still access it. And also the imminent risk is, the intent of the act is to actually minimize spread and virality. Not, and the fact that you're blocking it from Australians is missing the point. And especially when you're looking at sort of an increase in terrorist sort of activity and in the current situation, the risk, it's slippery. Anyway, it's very interesting, and I think he's being a fuckwit. I think he's just playing games, and I don't think that he's acting in good faith. Okay, I think that most people, again, most reasonable people with common sense, would go, well, why do you want to fight this? I think that the intention of this matters, and the fact that he is just quibbling to kick the can down the road to get out of paying fines and to sort of play cat and mouse with the fucking government. I don't think any sensible judge would look kindly on his conduct. Okay, I don't think that again, it's contextual as well. If it was someone else, it would be different, but this is just a clear technicality. And again, it might be, it needs clarifying, and it may end up, it's a gap. It's a gap. But you got to understand that this is not about misinformation. This is not about hurt feelings. In fact, the Act actually explicitly says that it has got nothing to do with, grief or fear or being triggered or anything like that, or feelings. It has an extremely high threshold. Okay, all of the online safety stuff. You're talking about the criminal standards, okay, because it is actually a criminal thing. So you've got, beyond reasonable doubt. You've got all of those reasonable doubt thresholds and all those sorts of things. You've got to prove intent. You've got to, all of those sorts of things. Okay, all of those things kick in. The second you have it as a criminal, as a prosecution rather than as a tort, you're talking about like a massive burden of proof. Okay, so anyway, so hang on, let me get my notes out. So they've got to take reasonable steps. It's got nothing to do with fucking misinformation or what safety. So I explicitly read the Act, dickhead. And also, so it's like. It also plugs in the gap. So initially, before the Online Safety Act, what it was it was only really protecting cyberbullying. It was to give to adults what you could already do with kids. That came out wrong. Cyberbullying only covered sort of child victims, but now it covers everyone who uses the internet. Now, so they actually differentiate between, obviously children and adults, and that ask questions around age verification. Again, question mark, question mark, question mark. But a lot of that stuff ends up in the courts and being clarified. And I think that's like the problem with Americans trying to deliberately misunderstanding, and Australians as well. Like there is a deliberate, there's a conflict of interest in terms of the Murdoch press and these sort of far right outlets and the way that they report this stuff. And that's because a lot of their business model relies on running troll farms and PR agencies that bully and harass people. Okay. And so they obviously have an interest in not, I'd make an example of them if I was the eSafety commissioner. I'd fucking go after the Murdoch press and go after the troll farms that are basically there to harass people, right? You can't even the vaping debate is a really good example of that, where you say anything that's remotely reasonable or factual about these things, and you'll get an army of mass reporting and bots, and they'll fucking attack you from all angles. You'll get they're designed to do that and harass you, and technically they're actually breaking the law. Like that's so the way that they have an interest in making sure that you don't trust the Online Safety Act, but it is fairly reasonable. There's gaps, okay? Everything has gaps, but the gaps are covered by checks and balances, the courts, clarifications. You can, if you are falsely accused, you have the right to go to trial. You can go to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. You can write to your minister. Now, again, you probably don't know that a lot of these things exist, okay? And that's fair enough because, whatever. I'm getting to the point where I don't think ignorance is an excuse for anything anymore. I used to be more empathetic to people who didn't know stuff, but now it's like you literally have access to all of the information. It's a matter of wanting to now. It's not a matter of access. It's a matter of will. at this point. Like you, is willful ignorance, which is literally like you're just arguing from ignorance, and you don't know how the law works. You don't know how laws are passed. You don't know that you've got multiple avenues of appeal, multiple avenues of complaint, so many checks and balances that it's crazy. It's, you know, we have a legalistic administrative state. We have a massive bureaucracy that can be protective. It's, you know, it's like, it is literally, if you know anything about our system, it's one of the most stable, robust, democratically, like, you have more options than most. Same thing. I mean, even America, I'd say that that's the case. Americans and their system is designed for participation. They're just fucking ignorant and stupid. 60% can't fucking read. I think it's only 60. I think something like, what was the stat that I read that like 60% of Americans are subliterate. Like they can't read, like read below a year six level. I mean, how do you even begin to deal with that fucking problem? So anyway, it explains a lot. But anyway, so basically, so the words around these things are quite deliberate. So when you're talking about things like reasonable, as I've said, the word reasonable establishes whether or not, like, they're trying to establish a duty of care. Okay, so online, if you're an adult bullying a child versus a child bullying a child, the adult would have a higher expectation. Okay, so a reasonable person would expect that an adult would behave themselves better than a child would. Okay, that's a good example of that. So if you're on Twitter and you're like having a go at some teenagers and it's like, you're the adult, grow up, stop punching, stop, you know, that a reasonable person would go, that adult should be conducting themselves better. Okay, if it's a teenager to a teenager, then obviously it's a peer sort of thing. If it's a younger kid to an adult, then the kid, you know, gets a sort of wider berth because, again, a reasonable person test, right? And it's the same thing. So that those things, that's where it depends. There's no, like, it's not just one person who's generic, who's whatever. Anyway, so, you know, like adults would be expected to know better. By using the internet, okay, it would be assumed that you conduct yourself in a certain way, that you would know better, that you wouldn't harass people and bully people, and that you would know what the line is. Now, tech companies should their whole thing is different because it's a moving bar. So even like back to my ban, right, from yesterday, which was that I didn't even know what I did. Like, I still couldn't tell you what I did. I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. But this shifting bar and moving sands, like, it is unreasonable because I can't clarify, I can't correct, I have no right of reply, and I just lose my account. I pay for premium where they said that I have support and I don't. You know, there's no good faith there. So again, common sense. Don't be a fuckwit. Okay. So, but again, you kind of got to have and also the threshold is to have the intention. Okay. So intention, again, has a legal definition to it. Again, something that you need to prove for a crime. Crime has to have an intention. Okay. Or be, in the case of negligence, be reasonably foreseeable. Okay. There's all of these criteria are there. I don't know why people argue and relitigate shit that has taken hundreds of years to build. It's fucking, what are you talking about? You're not a lawyer. Shut the fuck up. So anyway, but it doesn't include, like, it explicitly excludes. It has a high threshold, right? Not in the mood for streaming today, can you tell? But basically it's like, you have to, like, it has to be they use the word serious psychological harm, serious harassment. Harassment has a criminal definition. These things are defined in the criminal code, okay? And literally, they've got very strict criteria, checks and balances, all that sort of stuff. So you've got to satisfy the conditions of abuse and harm, okay? So it's actually got to be that. It does not include distress, grief, anger, fear. There's like a higher threshold than that. It doesn't include offense. So all of this dumb fucking like straw manning of like people going to be upset. It's like, well, no, maybe read the act. Maybe read the law. It literally excludes those things, okay? And it has to be accessible to Australia. So here's the criteria. It has to be accessible to Australian end users, has to be subject to complaint, okay, by somebody, okay? And it has to have failed to have been removed initially. But then after that, subsequently, another complaint has to be done with eSafety, okay? So abhorrent violent content is defined in the criminal code, and it's likely to cause significant harm to the public, okay? Which in the case, we're talking about a terrorist attack. Now, it's really interesting to me because a lot of the word terrorist is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Now, these are real concerns. Like obviously off the back of things like the Patriot Act, we've seen the word terrorism flown about, okay? Bandied about very loosely. I mean, we've seen it used on college protesters, for fuck's sake. Recently, the same people who are like, but what, you're going to abuse the word terrorist to censor my fucking Nazi shit. But those kids over there, they're terrorists. Make it make sense. Make it make fucking sense. Stop abusing the word then, dickhead. But it has to have a 3 equal threshold. Now, there has been chatter around that, especially with Muslim communities, and a lot of discontent, and rightly so, about banning, making sure that we are more precise in our definition so that we don't go down that sort of US path where anyone who is a T word, they're not securitized. And again, that's a whole other fucking thing, securitization theory. But basically using the word terrorist as cover to, go after like anyone that you don't like and go after dissent. Like, we're working through the process of making sure that that is defined, okay? But we do have some idea, okay? It's not like people act like every law is just, well, let's get our crayons out and solve this problem, shall we? Here's the one law that will fix all of the things. It's like, that's not how it works. Everything interacts with the others. It builds on everything. Case law builds on previous case law. Statute builds on other statutes. Policy, you got regulation, you got enforcement, but then you got avenues of appeal, you got all these things. That's why it's not authoritarian, for fuck's sake. It's got as many checks and balances as you could possibly get. Okay? My God. But the failure, so it's the threat that X has at the moment is not so much it's the failure to remove. So they, again, I feel like he's wriggling out. I think that an act of good faith would be to say, common sense tells us that we probably shouldn't keep that content up. However, it's worth noting the act as well. Let me go back. It also has exemptions. Okay? So tiring. Which journalism is an exemption. But it's very clear. Not Twitter journalists. Journalists. People who are actually with MEAA, who are employed by a registered media organisation, who are working in a journalistic capacity. Okay? I think that's reasonable. Okay? There's room there. If you want to be a journalist, you need to be held to journalistic ethics, standards, legal principles, all those sorts of things, media ethics, that stuff. Twitter doesn't count, okay? No matter how many times you say it, it's not journalism, okay? If you want to be a journalist, you adhere to those standards, and I hope that, and you get releases signed, you go through those processes, okay? You want the protections of a journalist, you be a journalist, and you do the rest of it. There are exemptions for. So this is all a situation where under the Act where the content can stay up. It won't be removed. Okay. So for research. Okay. So for research purposes, for enforcement. So even for law enforcement, it can be kept up because they need the live link there or whatever. Okay. They should still suppress it and suppress the reach, but it needs to stay up because for whatever reason, there needs to be a record for enforcement. Okay. It needs to be a live link or whatever. Also in the public interest. Okay, which is, again, made by a professional journalist. That has a legal definition. Look it up. Good faith artistic works. Again, leaning on good faith there. Okay, has a definition. Look it up. It interacts with case law. What does it mean? They don't use the words by accident, unlike the mouth breathers on Twitter. These words have a precise meaning. They refer to case law. They give us a reference point in which to search, such as good faith. What does good faith mean? It's almost like there's a body of fucking work around that's hundreds of years old around what good faith means. And if it's not clear, you can have a ruling in the High Court that clarifies it. Funny that. Artistic work. What is an artistic work? We got to have you can challenge this in court based on the words of the Act. Okay, challenge it. All right, and also activism, lawful procurement of a change of law. So if you are protesting and you are filming, so people have, and this was actually part of the consultation process, which people actually raised like the George Floyd incident, right, as an example of how these things people it would fall under that. So that wanting that there's lots of rooms, and again you can just defend. There's a defense, so they've put exemptions in the Act so that if you find yourself, again, it might be inconvenient for a minute, you might have to go to court, you might have to get a lawyer and go through the process. But if you can argue that it was a thing of activism and it was lawful procurement of a change of law, which in the George Floyd case, it probably, all those sorts of things, it did bring about and it is in the public interest, and the media picked it up and all those sorts of things, okay? It's covered by the Act for the most part. Now, there are gaps, yes. Is it going to be annoying to have to fight it in court? Yes. But if you get a lawyer, when I'm a lawyer, I'll represent you if I'd like you. If I think you're a fuckwit, I'm not going to do it. But, if I think you're good faith, then we would do. These things can be tested in the courts. That's what an Act is. It's what an Act of Parliament does, is they write the law and then the judges interpret the law. That's called democracy. It's called separation of powers. It's called checks and balances. Fuck me. It's not authoritarian. They pass an Act with words in it, and then the people get it, and then people fucking try their luck. Based on the law, the cops go, fuck it, I'm arresting you because of my interpretation. And then you go, I don't accept that. And they go, we'll go to court then. And then the judge will go, shut the fuck up. Or he's right, you're wrong. That's how the law works. And then you can go to the ombudsman and go, you know what? I think that this is bullshit. I think that this is like that they've breached my privacy. And the ombudsman will go, you know what? I think you're correct. I think what we'll do is we will look at this, and if there's enough complaints, what we'll do is we'll pull resources and do an investigation and see if the law needs blah blah blah. If there's enough of public thing, we'll run an inquiry. So what we'll do is say the Digital Services Platform inquiry that's been going for fucking years, with a report every year on these things that is open to public consultation every fucking year since like forever, on the problems which no one on Twitter seems to write on or write in or contribute to in any way. And what we'll do is we'll consider whether the law is working as intended or whether we need to patch some stuff up. By then, what we'll do is we'll introduce an amendment act which updates the law in line with what we think should happen as part of the consultative room. Anyway, so let's talk about how laws are made. 1, laws can be introduced by anybody in Parliament. Okay, it's usually the minister, but usually the ministers will introduce an act, a draft bill, based on advice that they've received. So through the ombudsmans and stuff, they'll run inquiries. So they'll have like for the online safety one, that was a 2-year consultation process before the draft bill was even done. Okay, so they industry bodies, lobby groups, interests, members of the public, you are free to submit your thoughts on the proposed Online Safety Act. Okay, that went for 2 years, where they came up with a draft. The minister then came up with a draft bill. Okay, here's the draft bill, everyone. What we want to do is update things, because the current laws only protect children and a few other things, and we're finding that things like revenge porn and those sorts of emerging problems with social media and all of those sorts of things. We need to sort of bridge some of these gaps. So what we'll do is we'll do a 2-year consultation process, where we ask when there were 1,000 submissions. Okay, they went through 1,000 submissions before they drafted the act. Okay, and then what we'll do is we will draft the legislation, and then we'll open it up for feedback again. Then what we'll do is we'll introduce that draft bill through Parliament. What it will do is we'll have a first reading, second reading, and it will be passed through the House of Representatives. Then it will go to the Senate for a first reading, second reading, and be passed. Then it will go to the Governor General, where it will sit for 28 days after it is signed, and then it will become law. After it becomes law, the eSafety Commissioner at any point can receive complaints, and the Minister can receive complaints, and there is a review process built in. And now, as of the news this morning, that authoritarian Prime Minister Albanese that we have has pulled forward the review by 12 months because it was open to review, okay, because of the nature of this stuff changing all the time. And he said, you know what, this isn't fit for purpose right now. Based on what we're going through right now, what we're going to do is we're going to open it up for a new public consultation process, which opens now and is open till June. And then there will be a report in October that says, you know, here's some of the things that, you know, we need to. And then what will happen then? Guess what happens then? They draft a new amendment act, a bill to amend it, and it goes through the same process again. And then what happens is that if you don't like it, you can go and complain. You can start a lawsuit. You can go to court. You can then, you can do, there's so many avenues. What more do you want? You got 3 months right now to complain. But you won't because you haven't read the act. You didn't know that there was an exemption for fucking journalism for a start. Oh, how come the media could share it and I can't? I don't know, Wall Street bets silver. Because the act says real journalists are allowed to share shit. Wall Street bets silver is not journalism. It's not fucking hard. Again, reasonable person, not an unreasonable fucking idiot. Where's my dick? I didn't explain any of this shit. Halfway through, I start to go and explain it. And then I go, why do I have to fucking explain basic shit that you can look up? Why do I have to look it up and write notes? Why can't you look it up and write notes? You can read. Oh, apparently. I think that you can punch a fucking keyboard with your fists. First punch! It's like, it's like, fucking idiots. But again, and even at any point, the courts can overturn like anything. Like it's not authoritarian to pass a fucking law because at any point the High Court can make it, can challenge it. Most famously, there's the Migration Act, which was passed in 1958, I think it was, the NZYQ case, which after 20 years of precedent, okay, the High Court ruled that detention is unconstitutional, that, what is it called? Wasn't thinking, fucking too many things, too many words, and I'm tired and I'm bored. I'm boring myself. But basically, like, detention is unconstitutional, right? Illegal. Yes, it's just like 20 years of precedent thrown out. Mabo threw out like a whole bunch, like hundreds of years of precedent. Okay, that's what the High Court does. Take it to the High Court. You think the Online Safety Act is unconstitutional? Then go and test that. Go get yourself fucking Well, you know what you should do? I think you should definitely post terrorist-related content. Test it, get yourself arrested, go to the High Court, spend the 10 years it takes, only to be shown that you don't have, that it doesn't, it's fucking constitutional or not. Go to court. You're not fighting by tweeting, okay? Go on. There's an open consultation process as of today, right now. Write a submission. Okay? There you go. It is under consideration as of this point. I'm actually going to be writing one because I've got a couple of things that I want to actually raise in terms of the gaps from the bill because I'm not a fuckwit. But it's amazing how but anyway, so the interesting part of laws that I'm talking that with this whole thing, it's kind of a nothing burger really, which is that X believes that they complied with the takedown. The government says they didn't. X is arguing that the Australian government doesn't have jurisdiction to take down content that is outside of Australia, which, again, interesting point. But that is going to be, it's boring. It's not that exciting. It's really not that fucking, it's actually I'm trying to make this is my problem. I'm actually trying to make this more interesting because it's really fucking boring, and even I'm boring myself with it. Okay? This is not something that needs spectacle. It's common sense shit. Can we just get back to like law and politics being like dull as fuck and for dorks, please? Like boring people? Can I just stop trying to, it's like, I know I'm not going to persuade anybody because like people are just watching reality TV and deciding that we live in America where you can just sue the government and there's one law for things. It's like, no, it's not related at all to misinformation. It's not related at all to safety or feelings of safety because the act explicitly excludes feelings of fucking being triggered and shit, okay? It literally has a threshold for serious harm, which has a serious threshold. There's a burden of proof, a criminal burden of proof there. Also, you've got to prove intent. Also, you've got to prove like the harm. Also, it's got to be foreseeable. Also, there's like so much of a high threshold there. Also, it's fucking mostly voluntary. And because Captain Fuckwit or Fuckstick or whatever you like, he just can't play nice. I agree with the Prime Minister. He's a fucking narcissist and arrogant and just, it's like, yeah, okay, fine. Quibble over jurisdiction. Interesting point, sir. Still a fuckwit. Okay? And it's like, people really just don't understand how this Online Safety Act. Now, again, there are some gaps and there are concerns, but obviously they're doing the review now. They've actually, literally, as I was preparing for this stream, that's another reason why I'm a little stammery. First of all, because I haven't done it for a while, but also because shit moved this morning, and I was just, and which is that it is currently now open for review. It's pulled the review forward by 12 months because they actually said, all right, this whole debate has gotten out of hand. It was meant to be voluntary. It was meant to be making nice and fucking, they were supposed to be doing the right thing. Captain Fuckwit over here, Fuckstick over here has decided to be a fuckwit. So what we're going to have to do is pull this thing forward and review and clarify. And we've got all this new information now. The previous criminal code update was in the wake of Christchurch. Now we have different changing conditions. I think we should bring that review forward. So now we've got 6 months. Where are we at? We're in April right now. So 6 month I've got a 3 month consultation process, and then they'll compile that into a review, which will be released in October. And that will result in some amendments that will go through the Parliament for the laws. How is that not good democratic? So you elect a representative, your local member of Parliament, in your electorate, okay, where you get we have, for the Americans out there and the UK, we have preferential voting, which you would call, what do you call it? Ranked choice voting. So everyone's vote gets counted, okay. Everyone's vote gets counted. You then also vote for an upper house, which is proportional representation to create checks and balances. That member of Parliament sits in Parliament and votes on in both the lower house and the upper house on the Act. They open that up to a public consultation process, which is open to everyone. They have an ombudsman established who has the powers to enforce it. That you can go at any point, you can call that MP's office, you can write to them where they actually have to respond, okay? You can write to the minister. My job used to be responding to ministerials, okay, when I was first a graduate, in between being a child protection worker and sort of before I went on maternity leave and went internet, my job was to respond to ministerials, okay? We have to respond legally. You have to respond to every ministerial question, right, that exists. Right, so that's the thing. Your member of Parliament has to respond to your inquiries, okay? Unless you're sort of a vexatious, annoying fucking person, and they have some discretion there, okay? How is this not democratic? What more do you fucking want? Seriously, what more? How much more democracy do people need? It's not just because you're lazy. It's like the people who go to a party and it's like they've been invited, and you go, well, what pizza do you want? And then you go, oh, they're not coming. And then everyone who did, they order pizza and they go, oh, well, and then you show up anyway and go, well, why isn't there any of my favorite pizza? Well, because you didn't fucking show up, dickhead, and you didn't say you were showing up, and you didn't put in a vote, and you didn't do anything. How are we supposed to know that you objected to the fucking pepperoni? What the fuck? Fuck off. That person's a fuckwit. And that person who's whinging about the Online Safety Act, having never participated or read it or done anything and calling it authoritarian, that person is also a fuckwit because they don't know what they're talking about, because they could have participated in the public consultation. They could respond to like the Digital Platform Services inquiry. They could write to their local MP. They could fucking do anything other than just brain fart on Twitter all day. They could learn how the laws are made. So anyway, so you've got Parliament. Then you've got the legal system where you can initiate a complaint at any time. You can take the court, you could take Twitter to court tomorrow. If you have a case, you've got to find a lawyer, right? You could find a lawyer that will do it. But, you could sue Twitter, sue X Corp tomorrow. You don't. You could get yourself arrested. You don't. Be the test case. You don't. You sit on Twitter, harping about authoritarianism, okay? You could go and do a complaint to the eSafety Commissioner and say, you know what, I don't think that I think you're operating outside of your remit with this stuff. I want to complain about you and the department and the minister, and they have to hear you at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. But no, not going to do that either. Can't be asked. You get multiple opportunities to comment. You could write a letter to the editor. You could write an op-ed. You could, I don't know, suggest an amendment to the legislation that's a little, using your vast expertise. But no, you're just going to sit and moan on Twitter about shit you know nothing about, because that's what we do now. Twitter is the law. So no, right now, today, there is a public consultation open on the Online Safety Act. Right now. You've got 3 months to write a submission. Off you fuck. Off you go. Do it. I'm gonna. I've got a couple of things I want to write. I've got a couple of things I've got to do, but it's there for you. How much more democracy do you need? I don't get it. Not authoritarian. If anything, it's too fucking democratic. Oh my God. And then our authoritarian Prime Minister says, you know what? I think that this is probably, we can't really wait. So what I'll do is we'll open this up. We'll open this up earlier now because I think we need to clarify some shit. Not enough. He's still a fucking There's only one authoritarian, and that's Elon Musk. Okay. He's just, learn what words mean. My God. Anyway, that's it. That's me. I said nothing I planned to do. I always have much better notes than I actually did. But I'm going to go. It's been too long. An hour and a half, that's long. Especially given that I waffled for fucking 45 minutes. But anyway. I'm going to be back. I did take some time off briefly because we had to sort of recalibrate some stuff. And because, because we're back on track now. So I'm back. Still doing comedy shit and all that sort of stuff, but I'm figuring it out. So I love you. Thanks for watching. Sorry this was garbage. I need to not have as many breaks. I need to actually be a bit more organized in my thoughts, but I always do better than I thought I did in the moment too. So, but anyway, it's not authoritarian. Stop it. We literally got so many options. My God. Also, stop calling people terrorists and then complaining that people abuse the word terrorist. Make it make sense. Stop. Live your values. That's all I ask. Just be consistent. I don't expect you to know everything. I don't expect you to be everything. I don't expect you to I just expect you to have a little bit of humility, know where your expertise begins and ends, and fucking know what words mean before using them. And seriously, be consistent. I do try to at least be consistent. For fuck's sake. Anyway, fucking, oh my God. American libertarians are the worst. They're the stupidest fucking, they're sitting there saying that you, non-aggression principle, except if it's a socialist protesting at a university campus, and then you should get the state to shoot them. Fuck me. Save me from this hellscape. I think that we should force the fucking... Do you know what I think we should do? I'm going to propose that we force every social network to federate and ban America. I'm going to start hanging out on TikTok where there's not going to be any Americans, or at least the Americans that can figure out how to get around it smart enough. The bait is like a level there. Anyway, I love you. I'll be back soon. I'm doing a lot of because now that obviously this consultation's open, I actually have something I can do, like contribute. So something that isn't just streaming shit on YouTube. But I do need. I'll be back Wednesday, talking about. I think I'm going to talk about the TikTok ban. But yeah, I'm back, and I'm going to do comedy diary stuff too. That's a little backburnery because mostly, I think. I don't know whether the strict stand-up route is for me. And there's not really much to talk about. If I'm not doing open mics, which, it can just be sort of incorporated into just better streams and stuff. It's anyway, I'm still rejigging and thinking about what I'm going to do. I'm also reconfiguring all the technical stuff. So I love you. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your precious life seconds. Blah, 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 blah. I got to piss, etc., etc., etc. Here's my bottle. See you Wednesday. Bye. Bye-bye. Okay. I am sorry. This always happens when I take a break. I'm sure that it's okay, but it was way too long and I fucking didn't get to